In the bustling city of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, Prince Khalid was a man admired by his community, a successful businessman and a devoted father of two. His family was a reflection of his hard work and dedication. His wife, Aisha, was the heart of their home, managing everything with grace while nurturing their children, Sammy and Lena, with unwavering love. From the outside, their lives appeared idyllic, but beneath the surface, cracks were quietly forming. Their modest home exuded warmth, a sanctuary filled with evidence of a thriving family life. Photographs of happy moments adorned the walls, children's artwork was proudly displayed on the refrigerator, and the living room corner was a mess of toys and books, a testament to Aisha's tireless efforts to create a nurturing environment. She was a woman of deep faith and tradition, a devoted wife who took pride in her role. Every meal she prepared, every bedtime story she told, was an expression of love and commitment to her family. Khalid, though often absent due to the demands of his growing business, had once been Aisha's partner in building this life. Their marriage had started in the customary way, arranged by their families, rooted in mutual respect. Over time, they had grown into a rhythm that worked. Khalid provided for the family financially, while Aisha focused on their home. Together, they had dreamed of traveling with their children, ensuring the best education for Sammy and Lena, and growing old surrounded by love. But as Khalid's business expanded, so did his absences. Weeks turned into months of travel, and even when he was home, his attention was often consumed by work. He was always on the phone or engrossed in emails, strategizing his next big deal. Aisha, understanding the demands of his career, bore the growing emotional distance in silence. She assured herself that Khalid was working hard for their future, even as the partnership they once shared began to fade. The children, Sammy and Lena, missed their father's presence, though they accepted Aisha's reassurances. "Baba is working hard for us," she would tell them with a gentle smile. Sammy would mimic his father, holding a toy phone and pretending to take business calls, while Lena would proudly present her drawings to a framed photo of Khalid on the mantel. Aisha watched these moments with a bittersweet ache, knowing they masked a deeper void that even she couldn't fill. It was during this time of growing isolation that Khalid's father, Hassan, began visiting more frequently. As the patriarch of the family, Hassan was a man deeply respected by all. He was known for his wisdom and firm but kind demeanor. To Sammy and Lena, he was Jiddo, the doting grandfather who always arrived with small gifts and endless stories from his youth. For Aisha, Hassan's presence initially felt like a lifeline. His visits brought a sense of stability to her otherwise lonely days. He played with the children, shared meals with the family, and often praised Aisha for her dedication. "You're the glue holding this family together," he'd say, his tone filled with admiration. Aisha, starved for validation, found comfort in these words, though they also served as a reminder of what was missing in her marriage. Hassan's role in their lives began to grow naturally, or so it seemed. He was attentive and thoughtful, always quick to notice when something needed fixing, or when Aisha seemed particularly tired. To the children, he was a source of joy, and to Aisha he became a trusted figure who filled some of the emotional gaps left by Khalid's absences. Yet, beneath his seemingly selfless gestures, Hassan's intentions were beginning to shift. The tension, though subtle, was already present. While the children adored their grandfather and Aisha appreciated his support, there were moments when Hassan's compliments carried an undertone that felt overly personal. A lingering glance here, a comment there. It was fleeting and easily dismissed, but it planted seeds of unease in Aisha's mind. Still, she chose to ignore it, convincing herself that it was her imagination. After all, Hassan was her father-in-law, a man she respected and trusted. To the outside world, the Khalid household remained the picture of stability. Aisha continued to fulfill her duties with quiet dedication, the children thrived under her care, and Hassan's visits brought a sense of unity. Yet beneath the surface, fault lines were forming. The perfect facade was beginning to crack, setting the stage for events that would forever change their lives. Inside the household, Khalid's prolonged absences created a growing void. While Aisha kept herself busy with the children and household responsibilities, the weight of her solitude became increasingly difficult to ignore. She had always prided herself on her resilience, But as the days turned into weeks without meaningful conversations or shared moments with her husband, cracks in her emotional armor began to show. At first, Hassan's frequent visits seemed like a blessing. His presence brought a sense of structure to Aisha's otherwise lonely days. He would arrive unannounced, always with a warm smile and thoughtful gestures. Whether it was small gifts for Sammy and Lena or helping Aisha with errands, Hassan's attentiveness stood in stark contrast to Khalid's growing distance. Hassan's role in the household naturally expanded. He filled in as a father figure for the children, playing games with Sami and listening to Lena's animated stories. He would praise Aisha's efforts, commenting on her ability to manage the family so gracefully in Khalid's absence. At first, these compliments felt like a balm to Aisha's weary soul. But Hassan's attentiveness grew more deliberate. He began finding opportunities to speak with Aisha alone, under the guise of concern for her well-being. "You seem tired," he noted during one visit. "Are you taking care of yourself?" His tone carried an intimacy that made Aisha uneasy, yet she struggled to articulate why. After all, wasn't he just being kind? She brushed off her discomfort, convincing herself that it was nothing more than her imagination. The tension between them began to deepen, though neither acknowledged it. Aisha found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, grateful for the companionship Hassan provided, yet uneasy about the subtle shifts in their interactions. She tried to set boundaries, limiting their conversations and focusing on the children when he was around. But Hassan was patient. He knew how to navigate these delicate moments, always pulling back just enough to keep her trust. Meanwhile, Khalid's sister Fatima started noticing changes in Aisha's behavior. During family gatherings, she observed how Aisha and Hassan interacted. There was nothing overtly inappropriate, but the way Hassan's eyes lingered on Aisha, the way she seemed both drawn to and wary of him, it was enough to raise Fatima's suspicions. She decided to keep a closer watch, though she kept her concerns to herself for the time being. Hassan's calculated efforts continued. He began creating situations where he and Aisha could be alone, always under the pretense of helping her. Whether it was fixing something in the house or accompanying her on errands, he made sure their moments together felt casual, even necessary. But these moments carried an unspoken weight that neither could ignore. Aisha, torn between her growing discomfort and her need for connection, found herself confiding in Hassan more than she should have. She spoke about her struggles, her loneliness, and the toll Khalid's absences were taking on her. Hassan listened intently, offering words of comfort that felt both reassuring and dangerously personal. "You're not alone, Aisha," he said during one such conversation. "I'm here for you, always." These words stayed with Aisha long after Hassan had left. She knew something was shifting between them, but she couldn't bring herself to confront it. Instead, she prayed for guidance, asking for strength to navigate the confusing emotions swirling within her. Yet each time she resolved to pull away, Hassan's kindness and understanding pulled her back in. Fatima's concerns grew as she continued to observe the dynamics between Hassan and Aisha. During a family dinner, she noticed how Hassan seemed to position himself near Aisha, his attention focused on her even when others were speaking. Aisha, for her part, seemed increasingly distracted, her usual warmth replaced by a quiet tension. Fatima decided it was time to speak to Khalid. "Khalid," she began one evening after dinner, "can we talk?" Khalid looked up from his phone, his expression distracted. "What is it, Fatima?" "It's about Father and Aisha," she said carefully. "I've noticed something different about the way they interact." Khalid frowned, his tone immediately defensive. "What are you talking about? Father has always been supportive of Aisha. He's just trying to help while I'm away." "I know that," Fatima replied, choosing her words cautiously. "But it's the way he looks at her, the way they talk. It feels off." Khalid sighed, irritation evident in his voice. "Fatima, you're overthinking this. Father would never cross a line, especially not with Aisha. He's always been a man of integrity." Fatima hesitated but pressed on. "I'm not accusing anyone, Khalid. I just think you should pay closer attention. That's all I'm saying." Though Khalid dismissed her concerns outwardly, Fatima's words lingered in his mind. Over the next few weeks, he began to notice subtle changes in Aisha's demeanor. Her quietness during their phone calls, her avoidance of eye contact during his brief visits home. He tried to rationalize it as stress, but the seed of doubt had been planted. For Aisha, the weight of guilt began to grow. While nothing explicit had happened between her and Hassan, she couldn't deny the blurred boundaries of their relationship. She prayed for clarity, for the strength to distance herself from the man who had become both a source of comfort and unease. Yet Hassan's presence was difficult to resist, and the lines continued to blur. The atmosphere in the household became increasingly strained. The unspoken tension between Aisha and Hassan began to ripple outward, unnoticed by many but palpable to those who paid attention. Fatima watched helplessly as Khalid, still trusting his father implicitly, failed to see what was unfolding before him. The stage was set for the truth to unravel, and the fragile threads holding the family together were about to snap. The house was unusually quiet when Khalid arrived home that evening, earlier than expected. His flight had landed ahead of schedule, and he anticipated surprising his family. The driveway was empty, and the faint glow of the living room lights spilled onto the porch. As he stepped inside, the silence struck him. Sammy and Lena's laughter, usually filling the house at this hour, was conspicuously absent. Placing his briefcase by the door, Khalid called out, "Aisha, kids?" The stillness that followed sent a chill through him. Assuming the children were staying with Fatima, as they often did when he was away, Khalid made his way toward the bedroom, hoping to find Aisha. Halfway down the hall, faint voices stopped him in his tracks. The sound came from the guest room, a space rarely used except during family visits. His heart began to race as he strained to identify the speakers. The tone was low, urgent, unmistakable. Aisha and his father, Hassan. Khalid's pulse quickened as he moved closer. The door was slightly ajar, and through the narrow gap, he caught a glimpse of the scene. Aisha stood close to Hassan, her posture tense, her face pale with what could only be fear. Hassan's hand rested lightly on her arm, his expression calm yet intense. The world around Khalid seemed to stop. His breath caught in his throat as the weight of what he was seeing sank in. A betrayal he hadn't even known to fear. Without thinking, he shoved the door open. The sound startled them both, and they turned toward him, their expressions worlds apart. Aisha's guilt and terror mirrored in her wide eyes, while Hassan maintained his usual composed facade. "Khalid!" Aisha gasped, her voice barely audible. "What the hell is this?" Khalid demanded, his voice low but charged with fury. His gaze darted between them, searching for answers in their silence. "Khalid, calm down," Hassan said smoothly, raising a hand as though to diffuse the situation. "You're misunderstanding what you're seeing." "Misunderstanding?" Khalid's bitter laugh echoed in the small room. "My wife and my father alone, late at night? What am I misunderstanding?" Aisha stepped forward, trembling. "Khalid, please, let me explain. It's not what it looks like." "Then what is it?" Khalid snapped, his voice sharp. "Tell me, Aisha, what am I looking at?" Tears spilled down Aisha's cheeks as she stammered. Hassan, he said he wanted to talk about you, about the family. I didn't—" "Stop!" Khalid roared, cutting her off. His focus shifted to Hassan, his voice trembling with anger. "And you were supposed to protect this family. You're my father. How could you do this?" Hassan's calm demeanor wavered only slightly. "Khalid," he said, his tone steady but defensive, "you've been neglecting your family. I stepped in to provide support. Nothing more." "Support?" Khalid's words dripped with venom. "You call this support? Manipulating my wife? Taking advantage of her loneliness? That's your idea of being a father?" Aisha sank to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "Khalid, I was lost. I was lonely. I made a terrible mistake, but I didn't mean to hurt you." Khalid's gaze locked onto her, his expression a mix of rage and heartbreak. "You didn't mean to hurt me? Aisha, you've destroyed everything." Hassan interjected, his voice firm. "Khalid, you're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. Nothing happened. We were just talking." "Talking?" Khalid's voice cracked as he turned on Hassan. "Do you think I'm blind? Do you think I don't see what's going on? You betrayed me. Both of you. The room fell silent, the weight of Khalid's words hanging in the air. Aisha wept softly, her guilt consuming her. Hassan stood motionless, his mask of composure slipping just enough to reveal the tension underneath. Khalid's breathing was heavy as he stepped back, his fists clenched at his sides. The betrayal burned through him like fire, and he struggled to control the rage coursing through his veins. Without another word, he turned and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the house, leaving Aisha and Hassan alone in the suffocating quiet. As Khalid stepped into the cool night air, his thoughts swirled in chaos. The trust he had once placed in his father, the love he had once shared with his wife, both shattered in an instant. His chest heaved as he tried to process what he had just witnessed, but the weight of the betrayal threatened to crush him. For the first time in his life, Khalid felt utterly and completely lost. The dim light of the room cast long shadows as Khalid stood frozen, his hand gripping the decorative knife. Aisha knelt before him, trembling and pleading, her tear-streaked face a portrait of fear and regret. Hassan stood behind her, his composed facade masking the turmoil within. The silence was suffocating, broken only by Aisha's sobs and Khalid's labored breathing. In that moment, Khalid's world fractured. The betrayal by the two people he trusted most was too much to bear. His mind replayed the scenes that had unfolded moments earlier. The stolen glances, the whispered exchanges. Every denial from Aisha and every justification from Hassan had only added fuel to his rage. "You've ruined everything," Khalid growled, his voice thick with anguish. His gaze burned into Aisha, the weight of her betrayal crushing him. "I gave you everything. My love, my trust. And this is how you repay me?" Aisha's voice trembled as she tried to explain. "Khalid, please. I didn't mean for this to happen. I was lost, lonely. I made a terrible mistake, but I never stopped loving you." "Stop lying," Khalid's shout echoed through the room. He turned his attention to Hassan, who remained eerily calm, his hands folded in front of him. "And you," Khalid hissed, his anger shifting. "You were supposed to protect this family. You were my father. How could you do this?" Hassan stepped forward, his tone steady. "Khalid, I know I failed you. I let my emotions get the better of me, and for that I am deeply sorry. But what good will come from this violence? Put down the knife. Let's talk." "Talk?" Khalid's bitter laugh filled the air. "You think words can fix this? You manipulated her, took advantage of her loneliness. And you—" He looked back at Aisha, his voice breaking. "You let him." Aisha sobbed uncontrollably, whispering, "I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared, ashamed. But I never wanted this." Khalid's grip on the knife loosened as he wrestled with his emotions. His mind screamed for retribution, but his heart, heavy with pain, hesitated. The man before him was his father, the one who had raised him, guided him, and taught him to be strong. Yet the man he loved had betrayed him in the worst possible way. In that moment, Khalid made a decision that would alter the course of his life. He took a deep breath, the weight of his choice settling in his chest. "I can't do it," he muttered, his voice barely audible. His gaze locked onto Aisha, his eyes cold and resolute. "I can't harm my father. He's the one who gave me life. But you—" He stepped closer to her, his voice low and trembling. "You broke every promise, every vow. You destroyed us." Aisha's cries intensified as she realized what Khalid intended. "No, Khalid, please," she begged, crawling toward him. "Think of the children. They need me. We can fix this." But Khalid's mind was made up. He raised the knife, his hand steady now. They needed a mother who honored her family, not one who tore it apart. Hassan's calm demeanor cracked as he lunged forward. "Khalid, stop! Don't do this! You'll regret it for the rest of your life." Khalid froze for a moment, his father's words ringing in his ears. But the image of Aisha's betrayal overwhelmed him. His heart hardened as he whispered, "I already regret trusting her." The knife came down, and Aisha's scream shattered the silence. The room descended into chaos as the weight of Khalid's actions settled over them. The lifeless body of the woman he once loved lay before him, and the knife slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. Hassan stood motionless, his face pale with shock. He opened his mouth to speak but found no words. Khalid turned to him, his eyes filled with a mixture of despair and defiance. "This is on you," Khalid said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You started this." The once peaceful home was now a scene of devastation. The echoes of Aisha's final scream still seemed to linger in the air, even as the house fell into an eerie silence. Khalid sat motionless on the floor, his hands stained with the consequences of his rage. The knife lay discarded beside him, its blade catching the faint light as though mocking the finality of what had just occurred. Hassan stood near the doorway, his face unreadable. For all his calm during the confrontation, even he seemed shaken by the turn of events. He glanced down at Aisha's lifeless body, then back at Khalid, his expression betraying a flicker of something, guilt, perhaps, or fear. Clearing his throat, he spoke in a measured tone, as though trying to regain control of the situation. "Khalid," Hassan began, his voice low but firm, "we need to think clearly now. What's done is done, but the authorities—" "Stop," Khalid cut him off, his voice hoarse. "Just stop." He buried his face in his hands, the weight of his actions pressing down on him like an unbearable burden. His mind raced with images of Aisha, her smile, her laughter, her betrayal. The person he had loved, the mother of his children, was gone by his own hand. The faint sound of sirens in the distance broke through his thoughts, their growing wail a cruel reminder of the inevitable. A neighbor had heard the commotion and called the police. Khalid didn't care. Perhaps part of him welcomed it, the promise of punishment offering some semblance of closure to the chaos that now consumed him. The door burst open minutes later, the police entering cautiously, weapons drawn. The scene they encountered was one of horror and confusion. A man kneeling on the floor, his face streaked with tears, a lifeless body lying nearby, and an older man standing silently to the side. The officers shouted commands, but Khalid didn't resist. He raised his hands slowly, his gaze unfocused, as though the world around him no longer mattered. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists, cold metal biting into his skin. As he was led away, his eyes lingered on Aisha one last time. A deep, wrenching sob escaped him, but no words came. The news of the incident spread quickly, shaking the community to its core. Khalid, once a respected businessman, was now the subject of whispers and speculation. The scandal that unfolded was too shocking for many to comprehend. A father and son caught in a tangled web of betrayal, culminating in an unthinkable act of violence. The trial that followed was swift but emotionally charged. The courtroom became a stage for the dissection of their lives. Every detail of Aisha and Hassan's relationship was laid bare, every interaction scrutinized. Khalid's lawyer argued that he had acted in a moment of uncontrollable rage, driven by betrayal and emotional torment. While the court acknowledged the complexity of the situation, they could not overlook the gravity of the crime. Khalid was sentenced to 20 years in prison. The verdict was met with mixed reactions. Some saw it as just, others believed it was too lenient. But for Khalid, the punishment felt irrelevant. The real sentence was the guilt he carried, a weight that would follow him for the rest of his life. Hassan, though not directly implicated in Aisha's death, faced his own reckoning. The community turned against him, their respect replaced by disdain. He became a pariah, the once revered patriarch now seen as the catalyst for the family's destruction. He lived out his days in isolation, haunted by the knowledge of his role in the tragedy. As for Khalid's children, Sammy and Lena, their lives were irreversibly changed. They were too young to fully understand what had happened, but the absence of their parents left a void that no one could fill. Fatima, Khalid's sister, took them in, doing her best to provide a stable and loving environment. Yet the shadows of the past loomed over them, shaping their lives in ways that only time would reveal. Years later, Khalid sat in his prison cell, staring at the worn photograph of his family that he had managed to keep. The faces in the picture smiled back at him, a fleeting memory of a time before the lies, the betrayal, and the loss. He often wondered if he could ever find redemption, though deep down, he knew some wounds could never truly heal. The tragedy of Khalid, Aisha, and Hassan became a cautionary tale, a grim reminder of the consequences of betrayal, unchecked desires, and the devastating power of rage. The family that once seemed so perfect was now a ghost of what it had been. Their story a warning for those who dared to tread the same path. This tale is not just about betrayal, it's about the devastating consequences of decisions made in the heat of the moment. It's a cautionary story of how unchecked emotions can spiral into irreparable damage, tearing apart families and leaving a legacy of pain. As you reflect on this heartbreaking case, we invite you to share your thoughts. Do you believe Khalid's actions were justified, or were they an unforgivable mistake? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more gripping cases like this. Your engagement helps us bring you the stories that matter most. Until next time, stay vigilant and remember, even the smallest cracks in trust can lead to the deepest wounds.